With tensions around Iran escalating and disruption in the Strait of Hormuz raising fresh concerns, energy markets are back on edge. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes through this narrow waterway, making it one of the most strategically important routes in global trade. Today, we're turning our focus to the United States, now one of the world's largest oil producers and exporters, and asking what a prolonged disruption in Hormuz could mean for U.S. imports, fuel prices, domestic producers, and the role of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I'm Johanna Bota, and joining me today is Alex Hodes, Director of Energy Market Strategy at StoneX. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you're having a very busy day, so I'm going to get straight to it. With Iran threatening ships in the Strait of Hormuz and shipping traffic effectively stopped, how exposed is the U.S. economy to this kind of disruption?
So while the U.S. is a major crude oil producer and exporter, there is a difference in grades of what the U.S. produces with regards to crude as compared to what's available in the Middle East. What's available in the Middle East is more of a, a medium and heavier sour crude grades, which are more prone to or able to create distillates, kind of the heavier end of the spectrum. And U.S. grades are typically lighter and sweeter, meaning less sulfur in them. So really the U.S. still does import some barrels from the Middle East, on the order of around 500 to 600,000 barrels per day. They can kind of look elsewhere to fulfill this gap. They will look towards Latin America for some of these grades, but still overall the prices of crude oil globally are going up, and that exposes the US economy just as a large consumer of crude oil refined products.
So can you tell me, for me as a consumer, let's say if I'm in the U.S., how it's going to affect me immediately in the short term?
Yeah, so just this morning we're seeing diesel prices up almost 40 cents per gallon. They were up around 32 cents per gallon yesterday, so that's a 70-cent jump in 2 days. Gasoline has rallied as well, but not nearly as strongly as diesel. So really what comes into that from a consumer standpoint, they have the visibility of what's at the pump. So gasoline prices kind of matter a little bit more to the consumer on a day-to-day basis, but really that diesel cost goes into everything. Transportation of getting goods from one place to the next. It's all trucks are essentially running on diesel fuel. So when you see those high prices go into diesel fuel, it's going to spill over across many goods in the economy. Anything you're buying, it's in everything. So almost a dollar move in diesel prices is going to make a substantial impact on the U.S. consumer.
Okay, so that's on the, I would say, negative side. So how could the U.S. actually benefit from this situation, since they're one of the leading oil producers and exporters of light crude?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good point. Buyers all over the globe are now kind of looking everywhere to essentially secure supplies of crude oil. So there have been reports of some Asian refiners who are typically very Middle East focused. That's where they get a lot of their crude oil grades, and they're talking about reducing their run rates of refiners. So the concern is out there for a lot of refiners, and they're going to look everywhere to kind of circumvent the Strait of Hormuz and just the Middle East in general. And they will look to the U.S., which is a large supplier of crude oil and refined products from an exporting standpoint. However, the extent of how much they can really expand these crude oil exports, that's where you're going to see how big that opportunity is for the U.S. But with these dislocations and these issues in the supply of crude oil and refined products, you're seeing the prices in the Gulf Coast rising substantially, and the U.S. will benefit from a spike in crude oil exports, refined product exports, propane exports as well. But really, they are limited on their export capacity. On the crude oil side of things, they have about 500 to 700,000 of additional 500 to 700,000 barrels per day of additional export capacity. And so they could temporarily kind of increase these exports, but having these ports run at these elevated rates, you can only do so without running into issues for such long of time. So we'll see an increase in exports definitely, but there's really kind of a cap on how high those exports can go.
So then at what point does the Strategic Petroleum Reserve become part of the conversation? Because as I understand it from what you just said, the Middle East is producing a different type of oil from what the U.S. produces. So what's in that reserve and when does it come into play?
Yeah, there are some different grades in the SPR. And as of the most recent data, there's about 415 million barrels of supply in the SPR. That's about 58% of its total capacity. Compare that against what it was in 2020 prior to the Ukraine conflict. There was 638 million barrels. So it has been depleted substantially. There is still an opportunity to draw down some of this, but we haven't seen the U.S. really talk about this as much, said that it's an option. But there was a headline this morning regarding the IEA, and they were stating that they are going to withdraw down some inventories as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing the U.S. do so. But really, again, we are capped on how much that export capacity can get in the U.S., but I believe it's not off the table at this moment, and we could start seeing more talk of it if this supply disruption continues.
That's the billion-dollar question. For how long? Alex, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your time during this very busy period. And thank you to our viewers for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.